Witmer, Broudy Precision. And I guess we could, Matthew's already started recording, so that's good. Thank you for that. Today's topic is the new Compact VAV Controller, Spyder Model 5 from Honeywell. I was going to put this off a couple weeks. I've been part of the beta for the last few weeks and still, I guess, doing some playing around and testing, but I thought it was a good time to show people and you know what it's about and more, I guess, details than actually going through all the programming with live, but just to show everybody what's coming. And actually, I was hoping and hearing that it was going to be releasing real soon, like last Friday or Monday this week. So I know last Monday they came out with the announcement on the Compact VAV. And I had gotten a couple questions, so I thought it was a good time to go ahead and do it. And hopefully, in the next week, within the next week, they'll be releasing the software for it. Web Squad has posted all the literature and the sample applications up on Building Swarm, which we'll have on our BP Tech Center probably today. I was hoping, like I said, that they were going to be putting up the software and whatnot. They have the folders for it in place, but they haven't posted it yet. So as soon as they do, you will know. So with that, we might as well get started. Again, Compact VAV Controller. This is part of the Spyder Model 5. And it was, I guess, about a year ago that they rolled out the unitary version of the Spyder Model 5 and what they called Phase 1. Right now they're in phase 2, which is updating the engineering tool for the VAV controller. And then there'll be a phase 3, which is to upgrade the tool for the new features to work with the standard Model 5 unitary controller. So everything we'll be going over today is for the Compact VAV. And also back in October of last year, we did a Tech Tuesday on the Spyder Model 5 unitary controller. And I have a couple slides from there on this one just to cover some of the how the programming is done, or between teaching and versus download, that kind of thing. But we do have a full video on the Spyder Model 5, and it has a lot of the features in there on the programming, which are the same as what's in phase 2 to some extent. So let's see, with that we can go ahead and move along. Just a quick overview on what the Compact VAV is. First, it's a freely programmable BACnet MSTP unitary controller. It can control virtually any VAV application and many non-VAV applications. VAV box, fan coil units, unit ventilators, conventional and heat pump units, room pressurization control, small point air handling units. Obviously, it's going to depend on the I/O mix that it's available. They believe it's 10 points on this. There's talk of having some expansion I/O that down the road, since there is a silk bus, they have some things that they could do down the road if they want to. You get the ability to migrate existing Spyder applications, just like we have with the Cyper 30. There's a migration tool in there to bring Spyders from. You can migrate stations, you can migrate exported libraries, things like that. You can then, it'll create the Compact VAV version for you. It's compact in design. I should say it's a compact design to be able to fit in small spaces, and actually what you can see here is it's slightly smaller than a dollar bill. If you put a dollar bill under it, it sticks out around the edges, so it's about the footprint of a US dollar bill, or a 10 or 100, whatever you got in your pocket. I had a 1. It does have silk bus, as I mentioned. You can use up to 3 silk wall modules. Only one TR120 will work with it. You couldn't put 2 on there. So you could have 2 TR42s, or you could have, and 1 TR120 if you wanted. Real-time clock with 72-hour backup with a supercapacitor. It's for scheduling, just like you had with your Spyder Classic. To do the programming, to do the downloading to the controllers, it does have to be a Webs branded station. It can run on the station can be, it could be a Cypher 50, it could be a Cypher 30, it could be a Webs 8000. You can use your laptop too if you were going to use that to do the programming and downloading. Once it's downloaded, you can take that MSTP controller and put it on any MSTP bus. It doesn't have to be a Webs branded Jace. Down the road, one of the things they're going to be adding is a feature that can be purchased to allow these to go on non-Webs stations, non-Webs platforms. So if you had a Vicon Jace and you wanted to use these and be able to program from there, there'll be a feature sort of like they have right now for the Spyder with Vicon Jaces. Now, I don't know what type of Jaces, what brands it would work on, but I know that that is something that is coming. Give a little overview on the hardware. It's roughly 6 inches by 3 by just about 4 inches. So it is a small footprint. It has a 0 to 2 inch bidirectional differential pressure transmitter built in. So polarity insensitive, so it doesn't matter if you get the twos backwards. It knows to take the absolute value of knows to take the higher value for control. So you'll never have that problem any longer with it being put on improperly at the factory or in the field. You got the I/O mix. You have 4 universal inputs. You've got 2 analog outputs and 3 solid-state relay digital outputs. The universal inputs are capable of 20K NTC, PT1000, 10K Type 3. It'll do 10K Type 2 as well. There's a thermistor chart or piece that you can put in there to have Type 3s work with it. Raw, 100 to 100,000 ohm range. It'll work as a digital input with dry contacts. It'll do analog input 0 to 10 volts as well. And the first universal input, UI1, it can be a fast pulse input. Max frequency of 15 hertz. Analog outputs can be configured for current or voltage, so you can do a 4 to 20 milliamp control or 0 to 10 volt control. And the digital outputs, as I mentioned, are solid state relays, 24 volt solid state relays with 1.5 amp continuous and a 3.5 amp inrush capability on the output. So the 3.5 is an inrush of 100 milliseconds per digital output. In comparison, the Spyder had 300 or 500 milliamps max with a continuous, and then 800 milliamps for 60 milliseconds. So the solid state relays are much better than the triacs we had on the Spyders. They'll be able to do floating control, being solid state, fast, quick on off. And then it should eliminate the need for, in most cases, for that pilot relay that you need to put into place in between the load and the controller that you had to do with the Spyder, because you have 3 times more of a load that you can hang on this digital output versus the Spyder. As I mentioned, you can do 3 silk wall modules. The terminal strips are color-coded and removable. And they're not removable like a Spyder terminal strip was removable. These are very easy to pull on and off of the controller. It's a huge difference. The actuator is removable. There's 1 screw in the back of it, and it just pulls off, and then there's a wire harness you just unplug from the bottom of the controller, and you can order a replacement actuator if need be. So they made that quite simple instead of that dovetail, and it wasn't really meant to be replaced on a Spyder. The controller has auto MAC addressing. From the factory, it's 255 by default. So when it first powers up, it'll go out and look at the network, and based on its min MAC and max MAC addressing, it'll set the MAC address somewhere between 1 and 35 as for the defaults. So it looks on the network to see what's not being used, and it'll assign it there. You do have the ability to go back in with software, back in with the tool, and manually give it a value, and it'll automatically change to that value. You can put it back to 255, which then will force it to go back and readdress itself as well. As I said, MAC addressing can be manually set with the controller property sheet. It supports auto-bauding. So on power up, it looks at what's out there on the network and will auto-baud to that. And the one of the areas that's always been questionable out there on MSTP networks is what's the unit load of the devices, so you know exactly how many devices you can put on a MSTP network. Well, the Spyders were a quarter unit load on the network. The new compact VAVs are an eighth load, so they take up half the space that a Spyder took up. And if you're not familiar with this unit load term, an MSTP network can have a maximum of 32 full unit loads on the network. That's a calculated value. I don't think you're going to end up wanting to put 32 times 8 controllers out there on one network, but basically it just shows how the what you can do on that network. So I think in the Spyders they always said maximum of 40 controllers. So you could potentially put more than that on there with the compact VAV. Also, just like the Spyder, you have a 20 volt DC, 75 milliamp output on the controller, so you can power up field devices with that voltage. It might be a humidity sensor or something like that that you're powering up, or a velocity pressure transmitter or something. The diagram here is showing the internal wiring of a controller. This is something that we usually don't even find on Honeywell literature. On the FAQ manuals by Guy Zebrick, he has these all laid out that way, so I thought it was worth putting that on here. So as you can see on the solid state relay outputs, there's 3 of them, and there's an in 1 through 3. So you have to source the voltage for these. So you actually have to go back to terminal 1, your 24 volt AC, your 24 volts AC, and power to this input terminal here to source the voltage for the solid state relays. Just like the Spyders, since it's a 2-wire BACnet bus, you have to use earth ground as that reference. So you have to make sure that you earth ground the 24 volt common terminal. There is no earth ground terminal on this controller, so you have to do it on the either at the transformer or do it at each controller on terminal 2 to earth ground. The shield terminal is just a dummy terminal. It's a convenience terminal. It doesn't go anywhere internally to the controller. You'll see your 24 volt common input is common to the grounds on your I/O. As I mentioned, you have to source the 24 volts to your solid state relays. And if we look at some of the software pieces to it, you have the controller is a BACnet Advanced Application Controller. While it's in progress, they've submitted it. I guess that takes a long time with the BACnet testing labs to approve that, but that is the intent of this controller, is to be approved for advanced application. In programming, it supports online and offline. So online, it's live, so every change you make it automatically gets downloaded to that controller. So if you're working live, then it's sort of like a all the time debug mode where you see live values in your application. Another neat feature, I think this is going to be a real helpful one, it's called application cloning. It allows you to set up a group of controllers that have applications where you can clone the application from a master controller, and then you designate target controllers, so you can do a master sync, which will then take that application and push it to the other controllers. And obviously VAVs is a really good example of doing that, where you'll have your cooling only boxes are all going to be identical, except for your flow set points, your K factor, those type of things. So they give you the ability in there to allow syncing or not syncing of your parameters. So in the case here on the config view for the VAV application for a canned one, you'll see all the flow set points. There's a sync checkbox. That sync checkbox, if you check it, that means when you do your master sync, it's going to allow that the master controller set points get pushed to those controllers, which obviously isn't something you want to do. Maybe on the initial one it might be, and then you go into each one individually and set up the proper, unique flow set points and K factors for each of the boxes. But then they also have the ability with the components within your application. There's a slot called Master Sync Enabled. So you could actually have it be that you may have some other pieces of your code that you don't want to push everywhere, or you don't want to get overwritten by the master. So you can go into these components and go to the Master Sync Enabled and set it to false. So then it'll lock that value to only be changed locally in its controller rather than have the master sync overwrite it. That's a nice step, and they give you flexibility so that you don't go and accidentally wipe out all of your unique settings on each of the controllers. Canned applications, they've got a handful written right now. John Hutchie has templates written for VAV with TR23s and VAVs with TR42s. Then he has a staged and he has an analog for your heat as your choices. So basically 4 templates are created. In those templates you have a standard graphic. This would be the status page here. This would be the set points PX here. And then over on the right side you can see where there's an application config view, where you can go in there and just very similar to the config wizard views that you had with the Spyders. You have your zone, config, temperature control, flow control, IO configurations. So you have easy to use screens to set up your application. And then also, as we had with Spyders, you have a flow balancing view, which is set up basically the same way that we would do the Spyder Venom balancing, where you could do your K-factor balancing, or you could do your 2-point balancing. And then you have your 0 balancing as well. So we have the ability to do all of those things. As I mentioned, we have a Spyder Classic or Spyder to Spyder 5 migration utility, which again is exactly the same way that it was done with the Spyder Model 30 migration tool. It's underneath Tools. It's called Spyder to RM NX Migrator. When you open that up, you have the ability to choose station, library, exported library, or custom palette. So you can go through and migrate those over and use them in the Spyder Model 5 VAV controllers. A little comparison of the Spyders. What I've listed here are, the first line is the Compact VAV. Then the next 2 are the 2 models of the Spyder Model 5 unitary controllers. And then the closest Spyder Classic controller that fits what the Compact VAV fits, and that's the PVB or PVL 4022 AS. And then if you look at it, live programming, you can do in everything but the old Spyders. Application cloning, only in the Spyder 5s. This is a big difference here. The old PVL, PVB controllers only had 372 kilobytes of memory. There's 4 meg of memory space in the new controllers. You have the integrated actuator with the Spyder Model 5 Compact VAV like you did the Spyder. The IO mix is for the Compact VAV versus the Spyder VAV. Both had 4 universal inputs, 2 analog outputs. Only 2 triacs with the Spyder, and we have 3 solid state relays with the Spyder Model 5 Compact VAV. And the new Compact VAV is BACnet MSTP only, where you had the option of choosing a LAN Spyder or a BACnet Spyder for VAV. The naming, or the part number convention, is similar to what the Spyder was. First part is the brand identifier, like central comfort point with CPO, There's a couple other ones out there too, but in our case, it's just web. V is VAV application, A is actuator, and then it's universal inputs, analog outputs, digital outputs, or the numbers. No more digital input because it just uses universal inputs. And then you have the BACnet designation, and then 24-volt AC, and then firmware version is N for Niagara, and that'll be the way that's set up. Now, I don't know what the intent is down the road of coming out with other models that have more I/O or less I/O on them, but this is the way that they'll be named, if nothing else. Now, I pulled this one from Guy's frequently asked questions manual, and really all your eyes are probably going to go down here to the bottom line, list price. What we're showing here is standards, the PVB 4022. The second column is the Spyder 5 unitary controller. That's what was released last year. Then you have the Spyder 5 Compact VAV is the column 3, and the Cyper 30 VAV controller is the last column. So you can see the pricing, and you'll see that the Compact VAV is slightly less than the Spyder VAV. If you want, I can stop here for a second and open it up for questions before we move on, rather than wait till the end. I figure with this slide, maybe there would be some questions. So if you want to unmute yourself, please do that. Now's your chance. Okay, I either put everybody to sleep or there's no questions yet. That's fine. Either way. And you have the diagnostics. They've added a couple more LEDs than what we had on the Spyders. Obviously, you have your power LED. There's a status LED, and then there's a BACnet transmit and a BACnet receive LED. And then based on the various possibilities of the blinking, you'll see over here that gives you a little more information than what we had with the Spyder. The big bad one, I should have highlighted this one red, is if both the power LED and the status LED are on solid, it's bricked. It's a dead controller, and it's going to need to be replaced. Luckily, the two I'm playing with, I didn't brick, so hopefully there's nothing that we can do that. Well, I'm sure somebody will find a way to be able to brick them, but hopefully not. But then you have, like I said, it tells you if the firmware downloaded, there's no application, if there's a broken sensor, short circuiting, when it's auto MAC addressing, unacknowledged alarms, and normal operation is just the power LED blinking half a second on, half a second off with the status LED off. And if we move, the next thing would be I'm doing a brief overview of the IRM programming components, and this was the same as what we have with the standard Spyder 5. Which, as I mentioned, was a Tech Tuesday back in October. So I just pulled a couple of these slides over just to go through that. When you have a application expanded or a controller expanded, what you're going to find in there is the control manager. Then you'll see there's a periodic program, there's an event program, onboard I/O, and alarms. Basically, the control manager, it manages all the functions and displays the status of the application on the controller. Periodic program, and this will be the folder that 99% of your applications will run. It is deterministic control engine there, so it's going to execute every 500 milliseconds, so every half a second it'll execute, guaranteed every half second. And it's going to run in a specific manner based on the priority, or not the priority, but the order number of each of the components that are in the application. So your application would run in here. If you have an application where you need something to run quickly right away, you could do that under the event program. It executes every 1 second, which you're wondering, okay, why would this be for fast applications? Well, under normal operation, it's every second. You set it up that if you have a binary input and you connect to a component within the event program, it'll run as soon as it sees a change on that binary input. So it, as soon as it sees it within a split second, it's gonna be a lot less than 500 milliseconds. It'll then cause that application to run at that point, and then it'll go back to once a second. Onboard I/O is the folder that is where you're going to discover and have your hardware I/O points, and then you'll utilize those throughout your application as well. And then the alarms is a folder for your alarming notification classes. As I mentioned, this is a controller that you can program live. Basically, you have two different engineering modes. You can do everything offline, and then go online to commission and download your controllers. It's done within Niagara, and then online you can actually, as you go, it'll download each change as you make it. So it's a basically instantaneous downloads every little piece. So it's constantly in sync, up to date in the controller with what you have in your database. The application running in your station, you have what's called the project, and that's actually the controller database, and it's located in the controller. And then you also have the controller. Obviously, the application lives in the controller. So you'll find where you can go in and you can clear out the project, you can clear out the controller, you can upload, or in this case here, it's teaching and learning. It's a different terminology than we're used to seeing, but teaching to controller downloads the application to the controller from the project that's in the station. And as you're making changes, you're going to find you'll see little yellow triangles with the exclamation point. That signifies that, hey, a change has been made, but it hasn't been pushed to or taught to or downloaded to the controller. So that signifies when you need to do a download. But within the control manager, you get to tell it what your teaching mode is. You get the choice, immediate or on demand. Immediate obviously means as you make a change, it teaches it to the controller. On demand would be that you want to make all these changes, but you don't want to disrupt the controller until you made all your changes. Then you can tell it teach, and it'll go out and download to the controller at that point. Learning would be where you're learning from the controller, allows you to upload the current application in the controller back to the project or in the station. So at least with the big difference, I guess I should say, between Spyder and the Compact VAV is in the Spyder world, if you didn't have a station, you had a standalone controller and somebody else programmed it, you go up to it with the Spyder tool, you upload that application out of there. The objects are generic named, there's no folders, so there's a big blob on your screen. It's intact, it's all there, but it's really difficult to go through. With the Compact VAV, when you do a learn, it's actually learning the entire application. So you get everything formatted exactly as it was in your station. So you're not going to lose anything with that. So in that case, you'd have a new station, you'd have a controller in your project database in your station. You do a learn from controller and it'll bring it back into your project, back into your station. As I mentioned, a few other things here. You have clear controller, so it deletes the application from the controller. Maybe something you want to do before you download a new application to it, just tell it clear controller, wipes it out. Then you can do a teach, and it'll take the application from your project in the station into that controller. Clear project would be where you want to clear the application space in your station for that particular controller. There's a check hardware compatibility, allows you to check, and it verifies that the configuration you have defined for that controller will work within that physical controller. And they have another piece in here called snapshots, where the current status of an application can be backed up and restored later. Take snapshot really means backing up the application. Restore snapshot means restoring an application to the project. So if you want to back up the application that you can reuse in different stations, you can take that and then restore it back. And then the last piece of it is the IRM BACnet Device Manager. This will be the BACnet Device Manager view you're going to use with your Spyder Model 5 controllers. You're not going to use the standard Venom BACnet Device Manager or the AX BACnet Device Manager. As long as you use this one, you'll see at the bottom there's a lot more features to it than you had with the standard Device Manager. You'll see in there that obviously you have your Discover. There are, you get your match. So if you build your application, you can match to what's discovered and have, have it start functioning. Set source, set target, that has to do with your cloning and your sync group. So we'll show that part live a little bit. Master sync would be where you're telling those target controllers to go ahead and download, because the big thing to keep in mind is when you are cloning an application, you're cloning a controller, it's cloning it in the project. You still would have to do your teach to controller in order to get it pushed out to the controllers. And then here's your clone application. And what's nice about that, if you've got 5 controllers, you highlight all 5, you click clone application, and then it'll ask you which is your master one. And then what happens is, to be part of the same group, the application type has to match. So whatever the master application or the source application, whatever its application type is, that's what's going to get assigned to the target ones. And you'll see here the master indication is source and target. When an application is downloaded or taught to the controller, you'll see the sync status as in sync. Otherwise, it'll say changes made or modified changes. We'll see that when I go through with the examples with it live. You'll see you have your clear controller, you have your teach to controller, application full teach to controller, learn from controller. And then one of the first things when you do add your controllers and you're talking live, you want to look at your firmware rev, especially now, since once this comes in releases, the controllers will be sent out. They'll have a lower rev version for firmware than what the current one is that's released. And this is supposed to be the release candidate, so we'll see what happens when they release it, if it's that version or not. But basically, you just hit the download firmware and it'll go and take care of that for you. So there's no more of the what was it with the Spyders where you had to use the you had to go through the tool offline and take the controllers off the Jace and go in and use the tool to
Flash.
What's that?
Flash.
Yeah, you got to do the reflash tool. Thank you. So they're all the main features for the device manager, and like I said, that's the main area that you'll be using with the controller versus using the standard device managers. Quick notes on the IRM function blocks and external applications. The IRM program, meaning those folders, only accept IRM control components. You can't use your kit control components within the application. You can't do any direct links of Niagara components within there as well. Basically, what you're going to do is create BACnet points in the point folder. And it still has a standard points folder. You're going to have the BACnet points there, and that's where you'll do your link to Niagara for integrating to other things. So with that, we can bring up the tool. And right now, what I have here is I'm actually running this on a Cyper 50 controller is where the station resides. And I've got in there I've got a Spyder Model 5. This is the unitary one, but I've got 2 VAV controllers right now on there as well. And if you click on the controller directly, it automatically brings up the view of the controller. I'm sorry, the PX standard view for its graphics. You have its status page, you have your set points page. And then if we expand that, you have your points folder. And again, these are all your BACnet points that you're bringing in from your application. And you have your IRM program, and the control program, or the control manager I mentioned, is where the status is for your controller. Tells you what the IO counts are. that teaching mode I mentioned, there's your on-demand, your immediate. Drop of BACnet output value. The one area I haven't had a chance to touch or play with is the peer-to-peer functionality. And from what I've read, it doesn't do standard peer-to-peer. It does a reference in, reference out type of thing. So I can't explain that. I can't show that today, but we'll be doing subsequent training videos as well as this moves along for everybody. Communication status tells you if it's online or not. Is it synchronized? Meaning, is the application in the controller matching the application in the project in your station? What the baud rate is. And for whatever reason, I must have had my baud rate set at 19.2, but 38.4 is the typical default baud rate that you would want to use.
What's the deal with Modbus?
There is no that. Remember, this is used for the unitary and for the VAV controllers. The unitary controller has a Modbus port on it as well. So on the Spyder Model 5 unitary controller, it has a second RS-485 for Modbus, where you could use that to bring in a VFD. You could use that to maybe do some I/O or something like that if you wanted to. But the unitary controller gives you the ability to do Modbus and bring in devices that way. They don't have that as part of the VAV controller. I don't think it's something that would be necessary for the VAV. Oh, yeah, thanks, Greg. Yeah, I was looking at. I saw baud rate and wasn't thinking. That's nothing to do with the BACnet baud rate. So whatever reason they left this Modbus piece in, just because it's used for these guys up here, the Spyder Model 5 unitary. And if we go back and look at the BACnet network, we'll see that we are running 38.4. Then you have application details config. This is supposed to be, and I say supposed to be because, like I said, I've been doing beta. This is where, just like the Spyder application, if you wanted to do VAV balancing, you had to be set for VAV zone terminal single duct application and then air balancing supported. And then if you have valves, you do those as well. And that's supposed to then allow you to do your VAV balancing. But as you can see here, if I do go there, it still doesn't let me do it. So I have a bug reported for this. So I figure I'm going to show it because it's, like I said, they haven't released it yet. So I don't know if this is part of why they haven't released it yet or not. But as you can see, to get to your balancing, it's on the controller itself, and you have the full balancing feature available when it works. And that at this point is not working. So we'll leave that go for now. On the control manager, as I said, you got all your statuses. You're going to set up if you're going to do immediate teaching or you're going to do on demand. And the only reason I could think of doing on demand would be if you're trying to change an application and it's a critical control and you don't want to disrupt control with intermediate downloads. So you want to completely change your application or do whatever it is offline and then force it at one time. That's the only reason I can think of to do it on demand, but you get to choose between, which one you want to do.
Frank, when these controllers are being downloaded, do you have a cycle of the outputs? I mean, what is the behavior of the controller?
It's whatever the application would. It depends on what you're making a change to. You're not downloading the whole controller. You're only downloading a single piece of it.
I see.
So if you broke a link to something and there's a chance that it's going to go from true to false or something like that, then yeah, it potentially could do that.
I see. Thank you.
But it's a VAV application, and yeah, I guess if you have stage reheat, it could be an issue. But I don't expect that you're going to find that to happen. If we move up from, there's no actions sitting on the control manager, but if we go back to the IRM manager, you'll see there's there's a couple things there. You got your actions. This is where you could go in and do your teach to controller. These are based, a lot of these are the same as what you're going to get on the device manager. So you can do your teaching from here, your learning from here. You got your hardware compatibility check you can do. Validate your silk buses. A lot of those things are there. The main thing we want to do is come back to the IRM device manager. So from here, I could select a controller, I could select two controllers, and I can, however many you have, hit download firmware, and you can broadcast it out to multiple controllers. So it's just a software change. It's not needing reflash tool and offline from the Jace to do anything like that we had to do with the Spyders in the past. If we wanted to, we could go in, I can show you how the cloning works if we, or the master sync. So let's look at my VAV application. If I go into, I'm just going to take an easy out. I'm going to go like this. I want to move these here. Simple. I really didn't change much, but I made a change to the application. I go back, and then if I come down to the other application, you'll see in here, they're still sitting up there like that. So I can come back to this controller here and tell it to, we'll try a teach to control. I found every time I go to do any of this, it's forcing me to do a application full. But actually, let's do this. Since it didn't tell us, it knows there's no real change to it, so it still says in sync. So let's go back in here. And I think here, if I do move the position of something, and I go back, it's still, whatever reason, it didn't update to tell me it was. I want to say it would eventually, it comes back and tells you that. I've had that happen yesterday, but I'll leave it like that for now. So if we come down here to this other controller, we know we made a change. We want to push it out to the others. We could highlight however many more there are that were the target controllers and teach to controller. And it's done. So now if we go into this other controller, we go into the zone logic. That's interesting. It did not move it, did it? Did I break it? Let me see if I still have them as a group. Source master. Let me just make sure I didn't change anything from when I was playing around yesterday. I'm going to form a master sync group. Here's my target, which one's my master? So we want that first controller. I may have broken it away because one of the things you can do is split off applications. I know I was playing with that at one point. So you do all this to, say you do it for every VAV controller, but then you have a handful that are going to have an exhaust fan or something else. You could split that you could split those targets off with this button down here to say, okay, I don't want to be part of that group anymore because I don't want to synchronize because I've got my own application now. So it gives you that ability. So now if we look, because I told it to again be a clone group again, a master sync. Now it is saying that it differs from project, meaning it differs from the master. So if we go back to double check to make sure, and we go in here. Okay, so we told it to be master, so this isn't a good example, but basically the good example of it is that we had that application, we made those changes, and then we told it to be a sync group. So now it's sitting ready to go in this second VAV. And what we saw there is what's in the project that's not in the controller because it says it's not in sync. So now we could turn around and sync to the controller. I'm going to do a full sync or a full teach since we just set it up as a master sync group. So as a full sync, it takes a little longer to do a download because you're downloading everything versus doing a standard teach, which is just whatever's changed. Any questions while this is doing this? Any comments? There's got to be something out there.
Hey, Frank.
Hey.
Quick question. I was just talking with Steve about the auto addressing. Typically we'll set those up when we're doing our engineering documentation that each controller has its own. So is that a scenario where we basically now have to just have all the controllers off and then like you can't pick and choose what address? It's like whatever first one we power up, it's just going to assign it address 1 or address 2 or something?
As a default, they are going to come in as address 255 null, which signifies for them to be auto-bauded, to be auto MAC addressed. If you assign MAC addresses to them, and it's obviously 255 isn't a valid one, then it'll use what you assign to it.
Okay, so if we do a discover, we have multiple boxes online and we do discover and they're 6 out on the network, but we really don't have a clue which one is which, right?
Yeah, the only way you would know is each one has a unique serial number.
Okay, so our tech can still grab that off.
Right. And they do have, let me see if that matches. Just looking, there is a barcode, but the barcode was on the actual, here it is here. Yeah, on the back side and the one side of the controller, yeah, it's there. So they do have that there, so that allows you to be able to figure out which one's which. So I guess if you had a barcode reader, that might be the way to do it.
Is that on the bottom, or is that?
It's right on the controller. Come on. All I do is I should be able to show this. Let's see if I take this. On the side of the controller itself is the serial number there. Yeah, you can see what the controller looks like there on my very neat and wired very nicely test bench.
Are these available to purchase right now, or are these still?
Well, based on that email that came out from Honeywell last week, they sure make it seem like they're available for purchase. Just the software is not available, so it's kind of tough to work with. I guess the thing would be if you have a project that you want to use these on, you don't need the programming right away. Then I imagine. Now I don't know if I've seen those announcements before, but never actually have them available to ship yet. But it's something we need to find out so that we can look to start stocking them, because obviously we want to be able to stock them, and especially knowing that it's firmware that's downloaded through Niagara, we're not too worried about if they come out with new releases, because the hardware is solid. The hardware there's no issues with. So that part, having stock of them shouldn't be a problem. It's just getting the latest firmware when it releases, and obviously we'll make sure we have that available to everybody through our BP Tech Center.
How's that going to be deployed?
Sorry?
Well, I know it's through the Jace. I'm saying, like, if you're running version whatever, is that just basically a new updated IRM module that you have to copy in? Or I'm just not sure how the firmware gets into Niagara. Like, what are you copying and pasting?
Well, the firmware, all you're doing is you're going to a specific folder, wherever you put it. So you'll go and find, like you were doing the other day with some firmware with another brand controller. You're going to go in, and you're going to go in and look for it. So in my case here, I would be going to.
That's the part I was missing. I just didn't know where
you have. I'm sorry.
That's the part I wasn't sure of, but we just have to grab it.
Yeah. So and here we go into firmware, and there's the firmware file. which matches what I have in my controller right now. So up on building swarm right now is a folder. That's the firmware folder underneath these controllers, underneath the Compact VAV controllers up there. So once they post that and have it available, we'll be putting it on our BP Tech Center so you have access to it. And the actual modules that are being used are modules you already have because of the phase 1 of the Spyder Model 5 unitary that you have in 4.8. And these are just updated jars for those. So there really aren't any that I can think of, any new jars. The new area would be the templates that Hutchie created that you could bring in. But if we just quickly go in and see what we have here, it's going to be primarily in this grouping here. I thought it'd be Honeywell IRC. There you are. IRC. Where would they? Oh, I'm still in the wrong section. Down here. Yeah, the IRM modules here. Plus, there's also the modules that were actually. There's a couple of modules that are used, I believe, even with the. I thought it was a Spyder module. I saw get updated as well. But basically, part of the release is going to be the modules you're going to need, the templates plus the firmware.
Okay.
So again, now we're all linked up, if we go in, and actually I noticed something here that I want to mention. You'll notice here something different that you wouldn't have seen in a Spyder. Normally you have your network set point, this module here. You'll notice that there's a save permanent module. That's something new. The way this control engine works, it requires this in order to be able to write back to this wall module, to this set point. So it's extra module. It's an extra component that's used in the application. So if you were to migrate one of your Spyder applications, you're going to see a lot of these added as well. And it's just the way these operate. It's just an extra piece that you got to be aware of. And I mentioned the way you could have it break out of your, the sync. And if we look here, there's your master sync enable. So if I wanted this network set point to be unique for this controller and not be part of my sync group, I would come in here and say, make it false. So now I made this change. We come back here. Let's see if I can get it to redeem myself. It still didn't show up that way. Let's go back here. It's still showing like that. So let's see, at least if I can make this work. See, now that it's not general released, I can still say, well, it's in beta. And but
You have to refresh the device manager screen.
it shouldn't. It shouldn't matter. Now, I should be able to at least then maybe I got to do the full. Okay, now it is saying unknown. So maybe after doing that, I don't know why you'd have to do a full teach after if you made a small change like that. But we'll see if it pulls it in now or not.
I think you broke it.
That's the intent of beta. I'm good at doing that. But while it's doing that, I should still be able to come over here. Let's say you're adding a new controller, a new VAV controller, and you wanted this to be dropped in. And as I mentioned, it's a template. So when you drop in this, VAV2R or whatever, it'll come up with the set points. So part of that template is the flow set points and things. Oh, I thought I already renamed that. VAV2R. Or it doesn't like me doing it while I'm doing a download, so I'm taxing it now. I'm not an impatient person or anything.
It's another task in the queue.
Now it comes up with that configuration property. So as you add these controllers, then you can say, okay, my duct area is this. Here's my K factor. These are my flow set points. And boom, done. So now I have that controller in the network, or in my project in the station. So you could from here do a discover, match, and have it ready to go after you do a teach. And I already know I can't take this and undisable or enable it. I've already added and deleted enough controllers. I didn't restart my Cyper 50, so I've exceeded my global capacity. So that's my excuse, and I'm sticking with it. But you can see doing a full download or a full application teach takes a bit of time. But realistically, I don't think it should need a full teach when you're doing, a partial. Our partial was just, I guess I don't have it open still, but we'll let it go through. What other questions? There's got to be more questions.
Can you hear me, Frank?
On the save permanence, I read that it's 10,000 write cycles. Is that for the whole controller for the save points?
That I do not know. Let me think. Do I have it open? Let's see. What was it called? Save points, right?
Save permanent.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah, save points is stupid.
I don't think it'll ever hit the 10,000 with set points, but
Yeah.
all the same, it's just one I was curious.
All right. It says the block is smart and won't burn to the 10,000 write max chip unless the data changes. So it's only when you're actually making a set point change. So I can't imagine somebody's going to make 10,000 changes in the lifetime of the controller, since it is a set point.
Yeah.
And it knows to not write if the value hasn't changed. And again, I'll do a plug for Guy Zebrick's FAQs, which we do post on a plug on our BP Tech Center. Every Monday I do go out to his site and I pull in any updated FAQs and put them on our BP Tech Center. So we should be current. But he did a great job pulling in all of the new Spyder 5 VAV, Compact VAV information. It's stuff that realistically should be in the Honeywell documentation. For whatever reason, it's not. Okay, so that's done. So now we go back into that controller, second controller. We should be able to see that the change was made, and son of a bitch, it didn't get made. Okay, well. The only thing I can think of is it doesn't tag that, because I really didn't change anything other than positioning. So maybe the positioning doesn't warrant a change. I don't know. That doesn't make sense to me, but it's in beta. And like I said, we'll be doing training videos and things as we go along for different aspects of this. And obviously cloning will be a big part of that. So we could check that off as a big fail for me. Thank you. But I like to fly without a net anyway. So let's see, what else? Looking at my list of things that I wanted to touch on. I believe I got everything. I mean, the only other thing I really didn't do, but I've done it in the past with the other Tech Tuesday or with the Cyper 30 Tech Tuesday was that tool. Now, where did it go? Oh, it's over on my other screen. So if you wanted to migrate a station that had some V8, some Spyder application that you want to use in your Spyder Model 5, you could turn around and say, okay, I want to take a station, and I made one up called, I thought I had one called Spyder Station. There it is. I'm going to take this one. The output directory is going to be under your user home, under the stations folder in a migrated stations folder. And you can put it wherever else you want to put it. That's the default. So I'm going to turn around and say, okay, sure, let's go ahead and migrate that. Migrated successfully, and there is a report txt file. So now if we go up here to my user home, stations, and then we go look for migrated stations, we'll see in there's my Spyder station. There's your report. So you can look at your report. Well, that's coming up. I want to stations, migrated stations. So here it's telling you exactly what's going on with that. And if we actually look at the BAC file, and we're doing it offline, and we can go in. Okay, there's I had a CVHU and a VAV Spyder application in there. So now if we look at that application, you're going to see there's an IRM program, and then this looks very similar to what we had in our Spyder. So these are actually Venom applications. So we can go in here and actually see what's going on. It's not that pretty with where it puts things, but at least you see you've got everything. You can go through and everything exists in there and it's usable. Well, that does bring up one thing. If we go find a, I think this will work. No, it doesn't have it there. I've shown another little adder, which was actually quite nice. AX property sheet. Oh, there it is. On any of these blocks, one of the things that we don't have in here is any kind of place to put notes yet. But what you can do is you right click on any of the components, you go to annotation, and you can say here, this is for whatever. And it actually has a slot that you actually can add a note to each of these components if you want. Nice little added piece in there to be able to document your code as your application as you're moving along. But so there you can see it automatically will convert a Spyder application over to the Compact VAV format. So with that, are there any? Let's just open up open things up for questions, comments. What do you think? Is this something you think that's going to be a product that'd be worth working with? I think there's some good features here that make it a better option than Spyders. I mean, I know you're not as flexible with the I/O counts that you were with the Spyders, at least at this point. But if for a VAV, having the cloning and some other features, this is a nice alternative, a nice piece to work with, especially with the immediate downloading, or I should say the immediate programming changes getting into the controller so you can see what's happening. I think it definitely helps. Like if we really, I guess I never even showed that when we were coming through here. These are all live data. There's no debug mode. They don't have a simulator to test things offline, but everything's live in here all the time. So your debug, is always on if you want to look at it as a Spyder. You make a change, boom, it's downloaded. Like that there would be a change, and it's downloaded and running in the controller. I think that's part of the little delay you'll see there with the hourglass, a little circle, is that it's sending it to the controller as it's changing on the screen. So what do you think? No more comments? Questions?
I think it was pretty cool the way that you were able to do the cloning of a VAV application and then just bring up the variables that need to be changed. It makes it very quick if you're doing a lot of them.
Right. Yeah, and especially with the the template allowing you to do there, but then having the ability to go in here and choosing, if we go back up here to the, let's see, was it here? No, it was down on. I lost what I was.
I think Mike brought up a valid concern, though. If you're having a crew roll across the floor and sticking in 30 of these things, it might get a little hairy trying to figure out which box is which.
Right.
You're going to have to be careful about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely need to watch what you're doing. That's going to be something we're going to need to do more playing around with to get a real good, solid procedure for doing that, to make it as simple and not have any issues doing it. It's all about saving time, so you want to make sure you don't make up for that and burn time by doing some of these other things that
Right, exactly.
that could cause an issue.
So Honeywell has the Ethernet off the Cypher 30, and they also have a twisted pair offering here, which is extremely competitive price-wise. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I mean, if you go back and you look at that last one here, it is priced well.
yeah, still a lot of jobs out there where twisted pair is the right price to be competitive against other contractors.
Yes.
And this is, I think, making us more competitive for those applications.
Right. And what I did on the last part of the slide deck was references. So it's an easy spot. You'll be able to download this PDF from BP Tech Center, and then all the links are here for each of the documents to be able to pull them in. And the FAQ, that'll take you to BP Tech Center, so you can go to Honeywell and pull it out of that Honeywell section of our BP Tech Center.
And as firmware updates come out and tool updates come out, Frank's very good about distributing that to our contractors. So guarantee you we'll be seeing them the next year.
And then with BP Tech Center, Matthew, if you want to, I mean, we have the ability in BP Tech Center to do, was it favorites in there? And then if there's something changed or added, you'll be notified. Is that how that works?
There's no notifications yet, but you can follow specific products, basically. Just star anything that you see that you want to follow, and then on the homepage of BP Tech Center, you get a list of just those specific items. And then there's a feed page as well that gives you that.
Okay, thank you. And usually if it's a major change or something needs to get out to people, I'll send out a notification anyway, just with, to my email group of all the webs guys, and make sure everybody's aware of it. And that was the other reason I set this last line up here, that you have to actually lock in the BP Tech Center to get it. One of the agreements I have with Guy Zebrick is we're able to publish them on BP Tech Center, but we can't have it freely obtainable by anybody. You actually have to be a webs partner to have access to that part of BP Tech Center to pull it. So just to protect all of us. Well, we ran a little long today, but I hope it was worthwhile. And, if anything comes up, you have any more questions, comments, or anything, please reach out to me, your salesman, anybody within Broudy Precision, and we'll be happy to help. I guess with that, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your business, and have a great day.
Great job as always, Frank. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.